Hi, my name is Cecil Walker,
And I am Adam Frower.
and this is Possibilities. Today we're going to be discussing how to relax, how to get the most out of your relaxation.
Your tone is so relaxed. You're like so mellow
This is
today.
just my voice. But I do want to kick us off kind of how we usually start things, is just defining what is this thing we're looking at. What is the relaxation that we're talking about trying to achieve here?
Yeah, so I think when we think about relaxation, then we think kind of about like a way to bring our emotional state or our cognition kind of to a lower, less stressful place. And so I think we oftentimes also connect relaxation to things that are enjoyable to us, things that bring us happiness, peace maybe. So I think it's interesting because I hadn't really ever thought about it, but oftentimes relaxation is accompanied by all of these emotion words of like happiness, peace, calmness. So I suppose there's got to be something about an emotional state that's in there as well.
That helps zero us in on it, but something I'm very curious about is, how do you know when you've achieved those things? You finally have the time, the space. Right now we're in the holiday season. A lot of people are going to get time off from work, time off from school. They're going to travel, they're going to be at home with their families.
Which may or may not be relaxing.
But there's room for it, there's opportunity. They could try to get some relaxation in. How do you know when you're doing it right, when you're achieving that joy, that peace, that it almost sounds like a strange question, how do you know when you're at peace, but how do you know when you're doing this right?
Yeah, I think that's also an interesting thing. I hadn't really thought about like doing relaxation right. But I think that there definitely are things that can help get into that relaxation place. I guess one of the things that might be useful too is to think about like what each person finds relaxing might be different. But I think instead of getting into the nuances of like, this is relaxing, but that is not relaxing, I think that wouldn't serve us well, because again, I think there's thousands of differences within people. I think really what might be useful for us is to think about, I might put a word in that's synonymous to relaxation, which is balance. I think oftentimes we think of relaxation as like, I've been working so hard, or I've been so stressed out, or I've been carrying so much of a load that I need time to let go of that, to not think about that, to not engage in those things, to completely just go to the other extreme of do nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes if we hold that mentality or that perspective of relaxation, we might actually do ourselves a disservice, because we'll move from one place of like full activity to the other extreme of no activity, and then we're not regulating our body experience, we're not regulating our emotional experience, and it can be really jarring to go from one to the other. And then inevitably what we have to do at the end of that vacation or those weeks off or whatever is go back to all of that stuff. And we feel ill prepared to go back. We might dread it, right? Every weekend people will talk about like, I just have the dread of what's going to happen on Monday because I got to get back to all of this stuff. And I think that dread is the result of moving from one extreme clear to the other extreme, and then having to force ourselves to go back. And so I think in some sense, relaxation isn't an extreme, but it's more of a balance of, I don't feel like I'm carrying too much, nor do I feel like I've let go so much that it's hard to move back to a place of responsibility or accountability.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in focusing in on how this is about balance. Anytime any neuropsychologist or physician talks about stress and the way that our lives and bodies relate to it, they describe it as stress is a state that a lot of us seem to stay in pretty frequently, pretty consistently, even though it's something that our bodies were built to only be in very temporarily, in a time of, I got to fix this problem, I got to deal with this problem. And for so many people, like you're saying, they're in this extreme place of work really hard, be super stressed. There's so many things I got to deal with and have my mind focused on. And then finally I get a break and I do totally nothing. I'm zero. I'm in bed all day. I'm binge watching TV. I'm absolutely just living kind of this nothing of a life for the day or for the week or whatever the break is. And both of those things are totally inconducive to your body and your mind being at its optimal level of performance. As maybe as pleasurable as it might seem to do nothing on your day off, just lie in bed, kind of just in a puddle, getting nothing done. Overindulging in that has its negative effects, and it's going to make you feel, one, you're going to feel unaccomplished and maybe even ashamed of that's how you spent your time. But also you're going to be sluggish. You're going to feel like, you're feeling the physiological impact of, I didn't get myself to go anywhere or do anything today. I didn't actually feed myself well. I didn't get any physical activity. I didn't do anything. I didn't make the most of that time. And so marking yourself somewhere in the middle, finding balance, like you're saying, I could see how that's part of the answer to making the most out of that time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you made me think of as well is that oftentimes, you said, like, how do I know I'm doing relaxation right? And I think it's hard to know, but I think one of the things that's kind of a tip that maybe you're going too far into that relaxation realm is when you start to use like rationalization with yourself, right? Some of the words that I hear people say sometimes is like, I deserve this day off, or I have worked so hard that I've earned this time to do nothing, or I feel like I've eaten so well, or I've been so stressed that I deserve this big huge bowl of ice cream, which is usually my rationalization. And so anytime that we in essence are saying to ourselves like, I wouldn't normally engage in this, but with this exception, I'm going to allow myself to overindulge, or I'm going to reward myself because I have been punished in so many ways. As soon as we get into that rationalization of like, this is something that I am owed, that's an indication that we're probably also going to feel regretful about having done that, right? Having eaten that thing, or having watched that one more episode, or whatever. And then you'll get to the end and you're like, well, I really want to watch the next one. I really shouldn't watch the next one. I kind of feel bad about having laid in bed for this long, but whatever, and here I go, right? And so you get into that place of rationalization. I think when you start to use those words of earned or deserved, you probably are getting close to the place where it's like, maybe you're going too far.
Yeah, when you start to kind of feel like you've racked up, the points or some type of currency that you can now splurge on this thing. And I think that's exactly what it starts looking like, is you're going to splurge, you're going to go all out, and you're going to go full in that direction. And you're probably not thinking about the consequences that come along with that. But that's what kind of leads me to thinking that the way to really make the most of this time is to maybe work from the opposite direction, instead of like working from, I've been working so hard and now I deserve this, and I know I want something opposite of this hard work that I've been doing. Working from another direction of, well, here's the version of myself that I want to be. Here's the feelings that I want to have. Here's the experience I want to have. And what should I do that puts me in line with that gets me closer to that? Because if you don't work from that direction, I think you get kind of short-sighted, kind of like a child, like you're going into a store, right? You would spend all your money on these things that maybe might at first give you some type of pleasure or give you some type of experience you want, but in no way will be good for you, and no way will be you making the most of that time and that money that you're spending. So I guess now, how do we find ourselves in the process of working towards the version of ourselves we want to be, what we want that relaxation to do for us? And how can this apply to everyone, not just people who seem to have a better control over, here's how I spend my time, versus people who their days just happen to them, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think as you were talking, a word kind of kept coming back to my mind, and the word was intentionality, right? If I know myself well enough, then I know when I get too overworked or when I get too stressed, these are the signs, right? I start to get fatigued. For me personally, I start to get a headache. Typically it's like kind of low in my neck and into my shoulders, and I know like I'm not holding this well. And I know that I need to do something to compensate for that. And so there are signs. So I think one is pay attention to the signs when you've overworked. But I think even more useful than that is this idea of being intentional and saying to yourself, like, okay, what kind of person do I want to be? I want to be a friendly person. Well, that inherently means I need to associate with people. I need to have friends in my realm. I need to connect with them in meaningful ways. Maybe it's I want to be a healthy person. That's going to influence the way that you eat. That's going to influence the way that you exercise. So then on those days, if I have kind of identified I'm just going to put those two things together. I'm a friendly, healthy person. Then on a day when I have some time, and again, like you mentioned, we're moving into the holidays, I'm inevitably going to have some time off. Do I spend all of that time and abandon and say, you know what, on the holidays, I no longer need to be healthy, so I'm going to indulge in all of the kinds of foods that aren't good for me, but that I like? Or is it that I'm going to be over friendly? So now instead of being responsible at work or whatever, now I spend all of my time being out with friends or doing things, spending so much time that I don't get any alone time, that I don't get any downtime, that's probably not healthy either. And so again, I think when we have in our heads this version of ourselves that we want to be, when we have a clear understanding of what are my values, how do I frame my life decisions, that influences then our relaxation, right? We might say, you know what, I do want to be a friendly person. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do this thing with one of my friends, but I'm going to do it in a way that's meaningful. I'm going to connect in a meaningful way, or maybe we're going to go do something that we both enjoy, or maybe I'm going to go out of my way to do something maybe I don't enjoy, but I know my friend really enjoys, and that's going to help them to know that this is a good, that I'm invested in our friendship. So when we understand who we are and what really is important to us, it changes the way we do our activities, right? And the same kind of a thing, right? Instead of sitting home and binge watching a show by myself, I might say, okay, being friendly is something that's important to me. So now I'll invite my friend over and we'll watch the show together, or and so the same activity might actually end up feeding our bodies or draining our bodies. And so I would say it's not necessarily about the activities that you do, or is this a relaxing activity or a not relaxing activity, but is this an activity that's in line with the version of me that I want to be? If so, it's going to feed me. Or is this an activity that's not in line with who I want to be? And if that's the case, it's going to drain me. And so finding that balance point changes the way we engage in presumably the exact same activities.
So then does that mean that if someone knows the version of themselves that they want to be, then they are already kind of familiar with, well, what does it take to be that kind of a person? What does it take for me to be in line with that kind of person?
I think yes and no. I think we may know what kind of person we want to be, and we might know some of the things that help us be that. But there will always be new things that happen, right? I might travel to a new place and find an activity there that I didn't never know that was a thing that really fed my soul. And so now I might want to take that in, or I might stumble across a new genre of music, or I might read a book I've never read before. And so I might still be surprised. I might still stumble across things that kind of are new to me. So I wouldn't say, yeah, if I know who I am, if I know the version of myself that I want to be, I know every percentage of what is happening. That would take some of the joy out of life. I think sometimes joy comes from discovering new things, which I think also gets in the way if we just sit at home and we do nothing and we don't right? So again, that feeding of our souls, we might need to engage in something. We might need to risk and say, I'm going to try this thing that I've never done before, and I'm going to risk that maybe I'm going to like it. Maybe there is enjoyment to be had. Maybe relaxation will come as a result of that. So I think knowing ourselves will be a very good guide, but it probably isn't a 100% fail-safe of like, I know who I am.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind in a conversation like this is I think a lot of people's first impressions could be that, well, that takes a lot of diligence. That takes a lot of forethought. You're saying know yourself. You're saying think about what would be most in line with the best version of yourself. And by the end of all that, it's like, well, now this is work. This is me having to put in a lot of effort, me having to put in a lot of thought. But I think that there obviously is a clear distinction between the intention here that you're putting into making the most out of your relaxation and the stress of sitting at your desk and doing the whatever work that you have to do that kind of stresses you out on a normal basis. What's that distinction? How does this lead towards our relaxation is fulfilling us and giving us the most that it can, instead of this is just another list of tasks that I have to do, and might as well add it to my other laundry list of to do?
Yeah, I think what you're asking a really important question, and I'm going to use an experience actually that I had last week, and hopefully this will answer it. So if it doesn't, then let me know.
Mm-hmm.
But I was talking to somebody who was kind of in a previous life was a professional soccer player. And that came up because of the World Cup, and right, so that's all going on. And I said, it seems like from an outsider's perspective that being an elite athlete like that, it takes a lot of work, a lot of diligence, all these words that you're saying to me right now, like that seems like a ton of effort. And I'm not sure I'm willing to put in that much effort to become a soccer player. And I said, did you ever feel drained? Did you ever feel like it was too much work? And he said, no. I loved doing it. And he said, one of the things he said was, I loved looking in the mirror and knowing I had worked hard to get the exact body that I needed to be good at this. And that in and of itself was rewarding. But then knowing that I could win and that that I could compete with really elite soccer players, that was rewarding to me. So it was hard and it was to required effort, but the effort was worth it. And I think in some sense, I would say the same thing about this, and I'll make one more comparison in a minute. But yeah, it's going to require effort to figure out who you are and to figure out what kind of version of person you want to be and to put those habits into place. And all of that's going to take work. But if it's really who you want to be, then the work will feel like it's worth it. In addition, one of the things that he said is all of the practices, all of that kind of stuff, I had to sacrifice other things that people wanted me to do. My friends would say, hey, let's go out and do such and such, or let's go drink or whatever. And he would say, no, I can't. I have to go work out. I have to go train. I have to whatever. And I said, wouldn't it have been easier just to go relax, right? To take the night off, to whatever. And he said, yeah, it would have been easier, but it would have undermined. I would have had to work twice as hard to make up for that day off. If I just stayed consistent, the effort was consistent. It was the same amount of effort. If I indulged, I would have to compensate and be like, man, now I'm sluggish. Now I ate all this stuff I shouldn't have eaten. And so the effort was actually more because I had engaged in this activity over here. And I think that same principle applies when we're talking about any kind of relaxation. There is a time to relax, but it shouldn't be a form of relaxation that then requires more effort to compensate from. And so I think, yeah, it will require work to become the kind of person you want to be. But if I overindulge, it might actually result in more work.
Yeah. I really like that as somewhat of like a base definition of what good relaxation can look like. It's not something that subtracts from the good that you put into yourself or the work that you do, in your life.
Or the version of you that you want to be.
Exactly. This shouldn't be an expense of some kind. It shouldn't be you finding some infidelity of the version that you want to be, but instead should feel like it's progressing you towards something that you want. It should feel like it's feeding you, like you said earlier. It's still in line with all the effort that you give, even when you're not necessarily relaxing. Because I do feel like that is how a lot of people just inherently define relaxation or time off. This is time where I get to spend these points that I built up doing all the work that I normally do. I was eating well, the rest of the month or the rest of the year. I was diligent, working hard at my job, at my studies. I was, working out for all these days in a row. And now when it's time to relax, I get to spend all those points I built up. I get to eat terribly. I get to do nothing. I get to kind of go all the way in this other direction at the expense of that stuff. And And I think it leaves you with a sum of zero, really, because you did exactly that. You spent all that effort that all that stuff that you built up before. But this idea that you could do something that continues to add on to who you want to be, that effort over there was worth it and adds to who you are and progresses you forward. And this effort here in your relaxation could also do the same. I don't think a lot of us think that way. I don't think a lot of us have come to define that's what relaxation could be.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think obviously some people might be watching and might be saying, like, so what are practical things that you can do to relax that aren't going to be a detriment to the kind of person you want to be? And I think about really simple things, right? I think about sleep, right? Sleep is something that can be really restorative. And a lot of the research says sleep is probably one of the most important things we can do to be healthy in lots of different ways. Healthy physically, healthy mentally, healthy spiritually, healthy, in every way. And when we overindulge in relaxation, we either sleep too much or we binge watch at the expense of sleep. So where we were working so hard and we were sacrificing sleep, now we're engaging in enjoyment at the expense of sleep. And so they're at extremes, but the consequence is the same. And so I think one of the things that you do to relax is you set a really healthy sleep habit where you go to bed each night at the same night. You have a relaxation ritual before you go to bed. Maybe you take a bath or a hot shower. Maybe you sit in bed and read a book, right? And you're training your body to slow down. And that's going to help you then get really good sleep that then will help you the next day to feel rejuvenated, will give you the energy that you need, will reduce that stress level, right? Similarly with exercise, right? You can overindulge in exercise. And lots of trainers will say things like, okay, you have an arm day or an upper body day, you have a lower body day. You don't do the same activities every single day. You give your body time to rest, to relax, to heal, but you don't do things that will then complicate that, right? You don't go out and then eat a lot of unhealthy foods. You don't drink loads of soda, because that's going to counteract the work that you've done. So instead, maybe you go on a light walk instead, or maybe you do take one day off, but you don't do something that's detrimental in the process.
Right.
So I think that there are things like that with relaxation. I think now in this age, a lot of people use their phones to relax, right? They stream a bunch of things, or they spend a lot of time on social media. They watch endless TikTok videos. And what happens is you just get sucked into the time warp, and then all of a sudden you're like, how did 6 hours go by? And again, that's not relaxation, that's mind-numbing activity. You're not going to get to the end of that and feel rejuvenated and relaxed, and you'll really feel a drain on your system. And so instead, setting an alarm for yourself and say, look, I'll give myself 30 minutes. And then I'll go do something else that's going to feed my soul. I'm going to go do something that I enjoy. I'll maybe go outside, or maybe I will read that book. So I'll fill my time with things that won't physically drain me. So I think that we can engage in those things that we earned or we deserved, but we can do it in a time-limited way. And that our bodies can manage that. Our bodies can handle that. But we're also setting ourselves up. We're providing ourselves with additional time, or we're engaging in other things that will help us to be healthy. And so I think, again, it all comes down to balance.
Yeah. In all of those examples, it sounds like what you're saying is that to find yourself on the path towards really rejuvenating yourself, really using this time to really relax in a meaningful way that's good for you, you're going to have to make some decisions that point you towards that good stuff for yourself. Like good sleep doesn't just accidentally happen. You don't just, let your body be left to its devices, do what it naturally wants to do, and you end up in bed at an early time and no distractions, and you're tired enough and ready to sleep, and you stay asleep the whole night. You have to make decisions that get you to that point. I think I heard on a podcast or something like that, the people at Netflix, when Netflix was really at its height, I suppose it's still doing well now, but it's got a lot of competition now. But when it was really at its height, when it was, the thing that was taking up everyone's time, and it was one of the only streaming platforms that was really popularly being used, the people at Netflix said their biggest competitor is sleep. The only way that they could get even more of people's time at that point was to start to give them reasons to sleep less, to make a show so addictive, so suspenseful that they watch just another episode and it bites into another chunk of an hour of their night of sleep. And so that lets us know that it's a bit of an uphill trek, right? To be able to say, well, if I want good sleep, I'm going to have to make a decision against this Netflix stuff. Not to villainize Netflix. I mean, it is very enjoyable, but I guess the point here is that it's not going to automatically turn itself off, and sleep's not just going to automatically grab you and be this thing that just happens.
Sadly.
So what you'll have to do is you'll have to make the decisions that find yourself in these positions of doing these things. You'll have to choose to have the physical activity that is best for you and use that time wisely. And I think once you start to make those decisions, kind of like what you're saying, you'll find the benefits so powerful and so rejuvenating that you won't want it any other way. I know plenty of people who are pretty consistent at working out, and they tell me that they know for a fact their mental health is better when they work out. And when they go through several days of missing working out, or maybe in weeks of missing working out, they know that the medicine that they need is that they just need to get back to being physically active. And so even though that takes work and intention, they want it. They want to be there. They want to have time for that because of how good it is for them and because it puts them in line with the version of themselves that they want to be.
Yeah, I think there's just a couple of other things that as you were talking came to my mind. I think one of the things is with this intentionality, I think we think of relaxation as something we do when we're not working.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some sense we also need to find a balance of work, and it's not necessarily something that we typically think of like, oh, now I'm relaxing because I'm not working, but I think we need to lower our stress level while working, and that also is a form of relaxation, right? It similarly with working out, right? Like if I hold the dumbbell here, I'm under tension. That's the opposite of relax. When I let it down, then it's when it's relaxed. And when you work out, there are moments when you're doing both. The value comes from doing both of those things. And I think it's similar with other kinds of mental work or those kinds of things. And so oftentimes we say, our boss says, can you do such and such? And we say, yes, I can. And we add more tension into our system. And in some sense, I would say relaxation might be simply saying, no, I can't because I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And I'm full. I'm full. And so relaxation might also mean being proactive about thinking about how do you protect your time? How do you set those boundaries that say, like, I feel like my muscle is so tensed all the time that I have to figure out a way to lower that for a moment. And that might be, I just can't take on one more thing. So I think that's another important component. And I think the other component is we have to be intentional about, again, this version of ourselves that we want to be. And we have to say, and that's what's going to guide those decisions of, should I turn on one more episode? Is it in line with the version of me that I want to be? Maybe you're watching it with your partner, and so spending that time, and you don't get much time together. And so maybe it is, I want to watch this one more episode because that's bringing us together. This is the time that we have to do that. So that same activity of watching one more serves a completely different purpose. And so I think, again, it's not necessarily the activity that is defined as relaxing or not relaxing or healthy or unhealthy, but it's the who am I? What version of me is being served by engaging in this activity?
Yeah. So it on one hand isn't so much the activity itself. It's what is this moving you towards? What is the meaning behind the process of this thing? The very last thing that I would contribute to this idea of how to make the most of your relaxation time is you and I are therapists, so we've spent lots of time in session with someone one-on-one or with a family or with a couple where we're talking about really important stuff, really meaningful stuff. And we're totally there with them. We're paying attention to the words that they're saying, to the characters in their lives who are important to them, to the things that they're saying they want for themselves and for their lives, for their relationships. And I think it's very clear how unfair it would be if in that moment we were thinking about, what am I going to have for dinner? What am I going to do after work today? Did I forget to do such and such task on my to-do list earlier today? Oh, this thing's been bothering me that I've been thinking about a lot. If we were somehow not fully there, it's very easy for anyone to be able to say, well, that's not totally fair. You're not making the most of that session. You're not giving as much as you could to that session. It's possible that those people in that session aren't getting the most as they could out of that if what you're doing is being mentally somewhere else at the same time. And I think the exact same thing is true about anything, but especially when we're trying to do something that's supposed to feed us and supposed to rejuvenate us. If my mind is still on my stressful job, or my mind is still on some problem that I have, it's anywhere but the place where I am at the moment of doing the thing that I'm doing. I'm subtracting from that. I'm taking only a fraction of what good that thing could be doing for me. And so if I'm doing all the other steps that we talked about, I'm being intentional about it, I'm thinking about the version of myself that I should be, and I get myself to go be in that place and do those things. If my mind is still stuck in work mode or stuck somewhere else that isn't a really rejuvenating place, I'm working against myself without even realizing it. And so that's the thing that I would say, is that it's possible to be doing the right things and not be present in it. And so to really get the maximum of it, we'd have to be fully there, even if that requires reminding ourselves, pulling ourselves back every now and then, but doing what we can to be there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Thanks for all your good thoughts. I think we just want to end by saying, as you go into this final weeks of the year, as you think about the version of yourself, obviously the new year is a good time to be thinking about the version of yourself you want to be. Don't neglect this idea of relaxation. Find ways to bring balance into your life. Do those things that are going to push you toward being that version of yourself that you want to be. If you know of somebody else who might benefit from watching this or learning about relaxation, please make sure to share it with them. Like and subscribe to this channel as well. We appreciate all your support. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.